Hello YouTube and hello Bible thumping wingnuts. So you asked this question, right, about certainty. Can we be certain of things? Can atheists in particular, be certain of things? And the answer is just clearly yes, right? We could be certain about all sorts of things. We might also be wrong about things that we're certain about. But you don't mean it like that, right? You mean, can you demonstrate something to be 100% true or something? And the answer to that is also yes. Of course we can. We particularly, this is particularly easy when we say, X is true with respect to Y, right? So we, all living organisms exist on a family tree. That proposition is true insofar as evolution is true, right? Insofar as evolution is the model that we are talking within, right? And then you have to ask about the veracity of evolution, of course, right? Well, can we know that evolution is true? And yeah, I think we can, right? It is in that it is the system that best coheres with the data that we have, right? And I would refer to that as a form of certainty, right? I'd refer to that, insofar as we can verify any model to be true or false. I think that we've demonstrated that evolution is the case. Now, but I am a bit of a historicist. I have to admit. I think that the question of truth is always, the word truth is something that always appears within a context. A little bit more, I don't know, I'm a little bit more, well, really of a historicist than Ozymandias seems to be. Truth claims, knowledge claims, I think, always take place within the horizon of some set of beliefs and understandings and various social constructions and whatever information that we have, right? We have a certain circle that we operate within, right? There's no question about that. I don't think, at least. We have access to a certain amount of knowledge, right? We have access to a certain level of discourse. So we're bound by that, right? I would say. And every claim to certainty is contingent on that horizon. Every not just certainty, every truth claim, I would say, is contingent on that horizon. So 2,000 years ago, if somebody claimed that the Earth was flat, right? Well, okay, now we know that the Earth is not flat, but we have. So we would say that they were wrong, right? That's false. But the fact is, right, if you take that truth claim with respect to the horizon of knowledge within which they were operating in, if you take that truth claim with respect to the boundaries of their possible knowledge, it doesn't. It's not a stupid thing to say, right? It's now we can fire a rocket off the Earth and take a picture of it, right? But if you're just hanging around and you look around and everywhere you look is flat, well, if that's as much as you know about uh, terrestrial affairs, then with respect to that horizon of knowledge, that proposition is true, right? Um, Once you begin to get some more information, maybe you talk to a sailor, and the sailor will tell you about how when you travel south, the stars move in this particular way, right? Or a sailor or a traveler might tell you, well, I walked down this way for a long time, and then I turned right. And then I walked straight for a really long time, and then I turned right again, and I walked straight for a really long time, and I ended up right back where I was. So the triangle that I sketched out is a triangle with more than 180 degrees, 90, 90, 90. So, once you have that bit of information, um, then the model of the Earth being flat is no longer sustainable, right? You have a new horizon of knowledge with which to grapple. Uh, you get incoming data, you get incoming information, right? And so then you postulate the Earth is round, and now that we can take pictures of it, I think that debate should be over. The Flat Earth Society persists, but it should be over. Um, the the same goes for evolution, right? I mean, Christian theology. I think atheists get this wrong a lot, right? Um, they get sort of the history of practical belief in Genesis wrong, right? Um, it we seem to have this narrative in our heads that for the longest time everybody believed that the Bible was literal, and then Darwin came along, and now people don't believe that anymore, and that's false. If you read Augustine, for instance, he reasoned that it couldn't be 7 days. God just had to pop it all into existence like that. And I mean that's he gives reasons why he thinks that's the case. And that's very early, 300 AD thereabouts, right? And also one of the most important and well-known voices in the history of Christianity. You have Origen of Alexandria, I think a little bit later, actively making fun of creationists, right? Wouldn't it be crazy if we believed that Genesis was real, right? Again, he's a church father, right? He's a well-known figure. It's not like I'm pulling people who are totally unknown out of the blue. Thomas Aquinas makes the claim. This is the Tobin view is roughly what the Catholic Church is very much tied to Aquinas in one way or another, and he elaborates a view that's perfectly consistent with evolution 500 years before Darwin, maybe. He articulates that the whole world was created, I think he says in 7 days, but just in potential, right? Everything that was going to unfold was created in 7 days, and so you imagine God and making birds, the essence of birds, right, that haven't unfolded into full being, right? And that's what Genesis is about for Aquinas, right? And as such, since we have this model now where it's just the essences of things that existed beforehand, but their existence hadn't come into fruition, that becomes a view that's perfectly consistent with evolution, and that's still pretty early. I mean, Origen Origen was writing. I didn't place him. I think it's in the 5th century. Um, Aquinas, I want to say the 1300s. I might be getting these dates wrong. Please correct me in the comments. Um, uh, so so yeah, it's a myth, right? That everyone were biblical literalists before Darwin came along, and they've just sort of backed up because science has pushed them back, right? I mean, there were lots of Christians who, when Darwin published his Origin of Species, were like, oh, all right, it doesn't affect anything I believe. Um, Not all Christians, right? But plenty of them. So I don't know how this turned into a conversation about Christian perspectives on evolution. Um, but the point is that if your horizon of knowledge is determined um, by the authority of Scripture, um, it's not. First of all, it's not a stable horizon. Um, there are lots of different ways to interpret Scripture. Um, if you can give me reason to suggest why Aquinas's view of Genesis is wrong, right? If you can give me one good reason to say that, then I'd love to hear it. But I don't think you can. We end up in this weird conversation about textual interpretation. But yeah, so we can be certain of things insofar as there is some horizon of knowledge. Evolution also, that model is defines a horizon of knowledge, right? It's definitely true that all models are define the sort of edges of possibility. So if evolution is true, we shouldn't expect to find what was the Kent Hovind debate, a dragonfly with a cell wall, right? We should never expect to find a dragonfly with a cell wall. If we found that, then we would have to overturn and reinterrogate what we're doing. We haven't found that. So yeah, like this question of certainty, I mean, the question of truth is always a question that's only true insofar as insofar as we have boundaries to the possible experiences and possible kinds of knowledge that are before us. I can't somehow step outside of the place and time, right? I can't somehow. Hegel puts it really well. I can't somehow creep up on the object from behind, right? No, we have to come to grips with the world, with what we have, right? We have human minds. Human minds have certain limitations, right? Part of the limitations of a human mind is that we're limited by sort of the culture, society, time period, blah, blah, blah. We're also limited, I think, by a priori faculties, right? We're limited with a priori reasons, right? I can't see into the microwave spectrum of light, for instance. That's a limitation on my humanity, right? I can sort of fake it with instruments, right? And then transpose what I get into visible waves. But that's not the same thing, right? So I as a human just have basic limitations that I have to come to grips with. And this is I think what you pre-suppers have a problem with epistemically is, how can we possibly transcend those limitations? How can we possibly creep up on the object from behind, right? How can we possibly get at the world um, uh, without all of this subjective bias and social construction and intersubjectivity getting in the way, right? Um, of the direct, immediate contact with the object, or some object of knowing, right? Some pure proposition that is not, in some sense, affected or influenced by those things. Um, and I want to submit that I don't think it's possible, right? And if you can give me an example of something, then I'd love to hear it. And I'll show you right away why I think it's impossible. Because in order to tell me that, you have to use language. And language is something that is an intersubjective, sort of socially constructed with some biological dimension thing, right? Language is, for you guys, very much a part of the problem, right? And it's philosophically difficult, right? It's very philosophically difficult to, the great dream of a lot of philosophers was to try and articulate some understanding of the world that was purely immediate. But the moment you begin to articulate something, you're mediating it with language. So it's not possible, right? So we can't creep up on the object from behind. It's just not in our. It's not in what we are, right? The very fact of what we are makes our cognition of things innately sort of biased and partial and subjective, right? But what I would want to submit to you is Kant makes this point actually, saying to other philosophers, you think that this is a bad thing, right? You think it's a bad thing that we have this network of things getting in the way of directly apprehending some truth with a capital T. But the fact is that without any of that, right? Without intersubjectivity, without language, without mind, right? Without partial and subjective viewpoints, standpoints, you lose everything, right? There is no such thing as truth without these things. There's no such thing as a true proposition because there are no propositions anymore, right? You lose when you begin to think about what you lose when you delete human subjectivity, right? When you delete all of those things that mediate between the subject and object. When you end up losing everything that you plan on claiming that you need. So the fact is that everything that the atheist would present as being a roadblock to certainty, is not just a roadblock to certainty. It's actually a condition of possibility of certainty, right? So we have this deconstructive moment where we can say the conditions of possibility of certainty are identical to the conditions of impossibility of certainty. All the things that you need in place before you can claim that something is certain can also be looked at as all the things that, when they're in place, make certainty so difficult to talk about. Certainty, again, in the sense that you mean it, Um, so yeah, I mean, we we have to take a new, like, what that means for me is that you need a better way of understanding what truth actually is, right? Um, why is truth something that is static, right? Why can't truth unfold in the world? Um, why can't truth be tied to inquiry, right? Why can't truth be something that is like like an archaeologist who dusts and dusts and dusts and slowly finds the form of the thing he's looking at. To claim that truth doesn't have this sort of historical dimension is to disavow um, what it is to be a human. Um, you lose something. You lose something very essential in doing that, I would say. Um, uh, I don't necessarily think that the truth that you claim to to have is something that is philosophically interesting, actually, or the kind of truth that you claim to have is something. I don't think it's philosophically interesting. I don't think it's meaningful, um, and I don't think there's any practical, like, application. Um, one of the big problems with theories of absolute truth is that they always end up being tautological, or they always seem to, at least. So yeah, that's that's sort of my view here. Is that yes, we can be certain. Um, we can be certain about propositions are, insofar as we recognize that we are existing within a certain moment in history, and we don't have access to some future moment of history. We don't have access to outside the moment of history that we're in. Um, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, you know. It's a good thing that knowledge is something unfolding and dynamic. It's not a bad thing that it's not, just here's a list of things that are true, necessarily and always, and you just have to cope with that. I don't know. We develop truth, right? Um, in some sense, we produce it. Um, a lot of the sort of analytic folks might take issue with those kinds of statements. Um, but I think if you think about it, it's not crazy. I don't think anything that I've said in this video is crazy, um, or untenable. I think it's just the reality of what we have to deal with. And we hope that we progress, right? We hope that our horizons of knowledge get larger and larger. Um, that's a good thing. That's called progress, right? Um, and to claim, I would almost say, to claim that you have access to some absolute truth, some final truth, that the last book has already been written, um, is anti everything that it is to participate in the project of being a human being. Um, so yeah, we can be certain. Have a good day.